The aircraft cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, cutting through the quiet night sky like a silver arrow. Most passengers were relaxed, trusting the steady hum of the engines and the routine nature of the flight. Soft cabin lights glowed above, and a flight attendant rolled a cart down the aisle with gentle smiles. Nothing felt unusual. The captain had made a calm announcement earlier, promising clear skies and an on-time arrival. For everyone on board, it was just another journey between cities, another ordinary chapter in their busy lives. Inside the cockpit, however, something had changed. A sudden silence replaced the steady exchange of professional communication between the two pilots. Their headsets lay slightly tilted, and the autopilot continued its programmed route without question. From the outside, the aircraft appeared perfectly stable, but inside that sealed cockpit, there was no response to the flashing indicators or incoming radio calls. The silence wasn't loud, yet it carried a weight that no one in the cabin could immediately understand or explain. Air traffic control noticed first. Routine check-ins were part of every flight, small confirmations that everything was operating normally. When the aircraft failed to respond to the first call, controllers assumed it was a minor technical delay. They tried again, adjusting frequencies and repeating the FIFIL light number clearly. Still nothing. Their calm professionalism began to tighten into concern. Screens displayed the plane's steady path, yet the lack of voice communication created a growing shadow of uncertainty across the control room. In the cabin, passengers slowly began sensing that something was wrong. It started with whispers between flight attendants near the galley. They attempted to contact the cockpit through the intercom, but there was no answer. One attendant knocked gently on the reinforced door, then harder. Her polite expression faded into confusion. A business. Man in the front row noticed the tension and removed his headphones. A mother held her sleeping child closer. The calm atmosphere began to thin like fragile glass. Among the passengers sat a young girl, perhaps 12 or 13, traveling alone to visit her grandmother. She had always been curious about airplanes, fascinated by how they worked. Earlier in the flight, she had listened carefully when a friendly flight attendant explained basic safety instructions near the cockpit area. She paid attention to small details, buttons, signals, procedures, things most adults ignored. Now, as fear quietly spread through the cabin, her sharp eyes noticed the crew's worry and the unanswered attempts to reach the pilots. The aircraft continued forward, steady and powerful, as if unaware of human anxiety inside it. Clouds drifted beneath like soft white oceans, yet inside, hearts were beating faster. The girl watched as a senior flight attendant tried once more to reach the cockpit through an emergency protocol device. Silence answered again. The attendant's hand trembled slightly before she composed herself. Passengers began asking questions. No one had clear answers. The plane was flying, but who was guiding it? Air traffic control escalated the situation. Military radar assistance was requested as a precaution. 2 Black Hawk helicopters on a routine night training mission received new coordinates and instructions to intercept the silent aircraft. The pilots understood the seriousness immediately. Though helicopters could not fly as high as commercial jets, they were directed to prepare for communication relay support and visual contact if the plane descended. Every second mattered. The sky, once peaceful, had become a stage for uncertainty. Back inside the cabin, the young girl felt fear rising in her chest, but something stronger pushed against it. Determination. She remembered hearing about emergency communication equipment stored near the crew station. While adults argued in hushed, worried voices, she quietly approached the flight attendant she trusted earlier. In a soft but steady voice, she asked if there was any way to send a signal manually. The attendant hesitated, surprised by the girl's courage, then nodded toward a backup radio system. With careful instruction, the girl was allowed to sit near the emergency communication panel. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the headset over her ears. Static filled her hearing, sharp and endless. See. He swallowed her fear and pressed the transmit button, remembering the phrase she once heard during a documentary about aviation rescues. Her voice was small but clear in the silent cabin. "Call sign Phoenix. Can anyone hear me?" The words seemed to float into the vast darkness beyond the AI aircraft. For a long moment, only static answered her. The passengers watched in complete silence, holding their breath as if even sound might disturb the fragile connection. The girl's heart pounded loudly in her ears. She tried again, slightly stronger this time. "Call sign Phoenix. Please respond." Thousands of feet below and miles away, a faint signal reached military frequency monitors. It was weak, barely detectable, but it was human. Inside one of the Black Hawk helicopters, a pilot adjusted his headset and frowned. He replayed the faint transmission, isolating the frequency. There it was again, a young voice, fragile yet determined. He immediately signaled his partner and transmitted a response. "Phoenix signal received. Identify your aircraft." Back on the silent commercial plane, the crackling reply burst through the headset. The girl's eyes widened with relief. Again, "Sent all odds, someone had heard her call in the endless sky." Inside the military helicopter, the pilots exchanged a serious glance the moment they understood the situation. The faint voice they had heard was not a mistake. A commercial aircraft at cruising altitude had gone silent, and a young passenger was now their only connection. Training took over immediately. Their movements became precise and focused. They contacted air traffic control to confirm the aircraft's identity and last known coordinates. The sky around them felt vast and dark, but the urgency sharpened their senses. Somewhere ahead, a plane full of lives depended on steady thinking and calm decisions. The helicopters adjusted course, climbing as high as safely possible while maintaining communication relay with controllers on the ground. They could not reach the same altitude as the passenger jet B, but they could support guidance and coordination. One pilot kept his eyes locked on instruments while the other spoke clearly into the headset. His tone was calm, controlled, and reassuring. "Phoenix, stay steady. Tell us what you see." Every word was chosen carefully, knowing fear could cess. Prid quickly if panic entered his voice. Back in the aircraft cabin, the young girl listened closely, holding the headset tightly against her ears. The adults around her watched with silent hope. She described the cockpit door, the flashing panels she could partially see through the small opening, and the unmoving figures of the pilots inside. Her voice. She shook at times, but she did not stop speaking. The helicopter pilot guided her gently, asking simple questions she could answer. Each small detail she provided helped them understand the situation more clearly. Flight attendants worked carefully beside her, following instruction. Sir from air traffic control through a secondary channel. Together, they managed to access the cockpit using emergency procedures. The door opened slowly, revealing the quiet control panels and the autopilot system still engaged. The girl described the glowing screens, the altitude reading, and the steady direction indicator. The Black Hawk pilot listened closely, piecing together a mental picture of the cockpit thousands of feet above the earth. The plane was stable, but without intervention, fuel and timing would soon become critical concerns. "Look for the autopilot panel," the helicopter pilot instructed calmly. The girl repeated his words softly, scanning the dashboard. One of the flight attendants carefully followed the guidance as well. The pilot spoke step by step, explaining which buttons to avoid and which indicators to read aloud. Every instruction was simple and clear. There was no room for confusion at that altitude. The passengers behind them sat in complete silence, some holding hands, others whispering prayers under their breath. Minutes felt like hours as the process continued. The sky outside remained endless and dark, dotted with distant stars. Inside the aircraft, hope slowly replaced fear. Air traffic control coordinated a nearby airport for emergency landing clearance. Runways were cleared, and ground. Crews prepared for arrival. The helicopter pilots relayed instructions steadily, maintaining constant communication with both the girl and the controllers below. The aircraft needed to change direction slightly to line up with the safest route for descent. "Phoenix, we're going to begin turning the aircraft," the helicopter pilot said in a steady tone. The girl repeated the instructions to the flight attendant, Bess. "ID her." Carefully, under guidance, they adjusted the autopilot heading. The plane responded slowly, almost gracefully, banking gently in the dark sky. A quiet gasp moved through the cabin as passengers felt the change in direction. It was the first clear sign that control was being regained. Hope grew stronger with every steady movement of the aircraft. The descent began gradually. The helicopter pilots monitored the jet's path through radar coordination, even though they could not fly alongside it at the same height. Air traffic control provided altitude checkpoints, and the girl continued reading. Numbers from the instrument panel. Her earlier fear had transformed into focused determination. She listened carefully before speaking, repeating each instruction to ensure accuracy. The adults around her supported her, but it was her steady voice that carried through the headset across miles of open sky. As the plane dropped below cruising altitude, the air pressure shifted slightly, and ears popped throughout the cabin. Outside the windows, darkness slowly softened as city lights appeared far below, like scattered stars on Earth. Emergency fee. Vehicles gathered near the runway, their lights flashing in preparation. The helicopter pilots remained on frequency, offering calm reassurance until the final stages. "You're doing great," one of them said quietly, knowing those words mattered more than technical instructions. The final approach required precision. Air traffic control guided the aircraft into alignment with the runway, while the autopilot handled descent speed. The girl read the remaining altitude numbers carefully, her voice surprisingly steady for someone so young. Passengers leaned forward, watching through windows as the ground grew closer. The runway lights formed two bright lines leading toward safety. In those moments, everyone on board understood how fragile and precious each second truly was. Then, with a firm but controlled contact, the wheels touched the runway. A rush of relief filled the cabin as the aircraft rolled forward, slowing steadily until it finally came to a complete stop. Applause. Yous broke out instantly, mixed with tears and laughter. Some passengers covered their faces, overwhelmed by emotion. Outside, emergency teams approached swiftly, ensuring everyone was safe. The crisis that had begun with silence at 35,000 feet ended with cheers on solid ground. When the cabin doors opened and fresh air rushed inside, many passengers turned toward the young girl. She removed the headset slowly, almost shyly, as if they had only done something ordinary. The Black Hawk pilots remained in contact long enough to confirm the safe landing before returning to their base. News of what had happened would later spread far beyond that runway. But in that quiet moment, one truth stood clear to everyone present. Sometimes heroes do not wear uniforms or stand in cockpits. Sometimes they sit quietly among strangers, unnoticed, until courage is required. On that night, bravery was not loud or dramatic. It was a trembling voice choosing to speak into the darkness. It was calm instructions given across miles of sky. It was passengers trusting one another, and as the engines powered down completely, every person on board understood that true heroism can come from the smallest, bravest voice.